Title: What My Husband's Boss Told Me in Private Was Unbelievable. You Won't Believe What Happened. My name is Emily Carter, and for as long as I can remember, I have been the type of person who believed in stability and consistency. My husband, Daniel, shared that same belief. We had been married for 12 years, living in a cozy home in Denver, Colorado. We had built a comfortable life together, and while we weren't wealthy, we had enough to enjoy life without much worry. Daniel had been working at a respected real estate company for nearly a decade. His boss, Richard Thompson, was a man I had only met briefly at company events, polite, but always with an aura of mystery surrounding him. What happened between Richard and me one afternoon turned out to be one of the most surprising and life-changing experiences of my entire life. It was something I never expected, something that challenged the way I thought about my husband's work, about trust, and even about myself. It all started one Saturday afternoon when Daniel was called into work for a sudden client meeting. I wasn't thrilled because we had plans for a family brunch that morning. But Daniel assured me that it was important, promising to make it up to me later. I stayed home, tidying up and scrolling through my phone when an unexpected knock echoed at the front door. When I opened it, there stood Richard Thompson, my husband's boss. He was dressed in a crisp navy suit even though it was the weekend, his expression calm but serious. "Good morning, Emily," he said politely. "I hope I'm not intruding. May I come in?" I hesitated. My husband's boss at my door, on a Saturday? That wasn't something that happened every day. Still, I invited him in, offering him coffee, which he politely accepted. As we sat down in the living room, I couldn't help but wonder why he was there. "Emily," Richard began, folding his hands. "I wanted to speak with you privately, before speaking further with Daniel. There's something you deserve to know." My heart skipped a beat. Deserve to know? That sounded serious. I braced myself. Richard went on to explain that Daniel had been working incredibly hard these past few months, more than I had even realized. Apparently, Daniel had taken on extra projects, volunteered for responsibilities no one else wanted, and had even been staying late more often than I knew. Richard explained that Daniel wasn't doing this just for career advancement, he had been pushing himself because he wanted to secure a long-term position that would guarantee financial stability for our family. I sat there stunned. I knew Daniel had been working hard, but I didn't realize just how much he had been sacrificing. Richard continued, telling me that Daniel's dedication had impressed not just him, but the entire executive board. They were considering Daniel for a promotion to a leadership role, something that would completely change our family's financial future. But here came the shocking part. Richard leaned closer, his voice lowering. "Emily, I wanted to tell you this because I've seen men like Daniel burn themselves out. He doesn't complain, and he won't tell you the extent of the pressure he's under. But I wanted you to know so that you could support him, not just congratulate him when the promotion comes, but also remind him that he doesn't need to destroy himself to prove his worth." That hit me like a wave. My husband, who always put on a brave face at home, was silently carrying a weight much heavier than I imagined. Tears pricked at my eyes. Richard gave me a small, reassuring smile and said, "Your husband is the kind of man who deserves recognition, not just from his company, but from his family. Sometimes, the best way to help someone succeed is to remind them that they're already enough." I was speechless. Richard soon finished his coffee and stood to leave, giving me a polite nod. "Please keep this between us for now. I'll announce everything at the company's quarterly event, but until then, just be there for him." When the door closed behind him, I sat frozen, my mind racing. I had been frustrated with Daniel for missing brunch, annoyed at his long work hours, and even resentful that he seemed distracted at home. But now, I realized he was carrying the weight of our future. That evening, when Daniel came home exhausted, I greeted him with a warm hug instead of a list of complaints. He seemed surprised, but he hugged me back tightly. I didn't tell him what Richard had said, but I began noticing all the little ways Daniel was straining himself. I started cooking his favorite meals more often, encouraged him to take breaks, and reminded him that he was appreciated. Weeks later, at the company's quarterly dinner, Richard took the stage. When he announced Daniel's promotion to Director of Client Relations, the entire room erupted in applause. Daniel's face lit up with a mixture of pride and relief. I clapped harder than anyone else in that room, my heart swelling with pride. Afterward, Daniel turned to me and whispered, "I couldn't have done this without you." I smiled, knowing the truth. He had been strong and determined all along. All I did was remind him that he wasn't alone. Richard caught my eye from across the room and gave me a small nod. It was our unspoken acknowledgement of that afternoon conversation, the one that changed everything. That private talk with my husband's boss had been unbelievable, not because it exposed any dark secret, but because it revealed something powerful about love, dedication, and the importance of truly seeing the people we care about. From that day on, I promised myself I would never take Daniel's hard work for granted again. Behind every success story is a person carrying invisible weight, and sometimes, all it takes is one moment of understanding to lighten the load. And so, what my husband's boss told me in private didn't just change the way I saw Daniel, it changed the way I loved him.